This company burned its entire house down just to keep one room lit. Not by accident, not in a panic. As if someone calmly walked from floor to floor with a gas can, whispering, "Save the room, forget the house." On paper, it looked like a grown-up. A once diversified, respected player with real enterprise tech, boring but steady services, and a handful of side businesses that actually made money. It sold software to big corporations, ran support contracts, licensed tools that had nothing to do with hype. For years, that mix paid the bills. Then, one revolutionary flagship product walked in, and everything else slowly started to starve. Inside the boardroom, they didn't just like this product. They baptized it. This was the future, the identity, the thing that would make them rich and turn a solid business into a legend. The pitch was simple. If they just pushed hard enough, if they just fed it enough cash, this one idea would conquer the market. So what really happened here when a rational company decided that one product was worth more than the company itself? The numbers tell you how crazy it got. Billions in market value erased in a few brutal years. A stock chart that looked less like a dip and more like a cliff. Thousands of jobs gone, entire campuses emptied, office lights switched off for good. Profitable divisions, the quiet enterprise unit, the reliable services arm, sold off at discount prices just to keep funding development and marketing for the golden child. Publicly, leadership sounded almost offended anyone would doubt them. On earnings calls, they called the product success inevitable. Every missed target was temporary. Every red flag was early phase noise. When sales flattened and competitors pulled ahead, the answer was always the same. Spend more, bet bigger, double down. At what point does visionary commitment turn into self-destructive delusion? And why did smart executives, with decades of experience and plenty of data, keep pushing chips into the middle of the table when the dealer was already sweeping their money away? This is a story of sunk costs and soaring egos, of people who tied their personal legacies to a single launch and couldn't untie the knot without admitting they were wrong. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, you'll see how internal power struggles turned into something that looked a lot like a cult, where doubting the product was treated almost like disloyalty, because it didn't stop at bad forecasts and overconfident quotes. Things will just get crazier and crazier. We're going to watch executives gut healthy business lines to free up just a little more cash. We'll see frantic asset sales, emergency financings, and the final year where almost the entire remaining budget was funneled into a flagship the market had already rejected. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of the company that chose death so one product could live. This is not the WeWork story, but it feels like it escaped from the same lab. You still get the charismatic leadership circle, the big messianic speeches about changing the world, and the one product held up like a sacred object. You just don't get the $47 billion valuation or the private jets. Think of it as a discount cult. Same psychology, less money. Because this is a story of a company that burned its entire house down just to keep one room lit. Executives didn't lose focus. They became obsessed. Every meeting, every slide deck, every late-night email kept circling back to the same thing, the flagship, even when sales were sliding, even when competitors were overtaking it. Inside the building, there was only one question that really mattered. How do we save the product? So what really happened here is going to play out like a corporate true crime documentary. Part rise and fall business thriller. Part psychological study of obsession. Part financial autopsy of a dead unicorn that never quite made it to unicorn status. Wall Street thought they were watching a clever series of pivots. Inside the company, it looked a lot more like a slow, ritual sacrifice. We're going to track the story from the very beginning. From the founder's childhood mindset and early side hustles, through those first awkward startups where friends politely pretended the idea wasn't crazy. We'll see how that personality, half ambitious, half slightly delusional, finally collided with one breakout product that actually worked. For a while, it printed money. It defined the brand. It became the company's entire identity. That's where the real problems start. When leaders fuse their own identity to a product, killing it feels like killing themselves. Every warning sign gets reinterpreted as temporary headwinds. Every earnings call turns into a sermon about inevitable success. Cheap capital and hype arrive, and suddenly, a normal business with normal risks starts behaving like a movement. It stops asking, "Does this make sense?" and starts asking, "Do you believe?" As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Profitable divisions will be sold off to fund one more relaunch. Healthy teams will be laid off so the flagship can hire another growth squad. Debt will pile up, cash will burn, and yet leadership will keep promising that the next version, the next feature, the next quarter is when everything turns. Along the way, we'll dig into sunk cost thinking, the way cheap money distorts reality, and why investors keep mistaking desperation for strategy. By the end, you'll be able to look at today's market and quietly spot the other companies walking the same path, still smiling on CNBC while they quietly sell the furniture to keep one dying product on life support. And in the next section, we'll start where all good cult stories begin, with one founder, one big idea, and a past that made it almost impossible to ever walk away. So if the company later looked like a cult, it's because the cult leader was built long before the product ever shipped. The founder grew up in motion. New schools, new apartments, new friends, same problems. His parents were the kind of people who could give a 2-hour lecture about hard work and success, and still be arguing about overdue bills at the kitchen table. Success was always right around the corner, but the corner never seemed to show up. That kind of childhood does something to you. Every move was sold as an opportunity. Every downgrade was temporary. He learned early how to smile through instability, how to tell a good story about a bad situation, and quietly, he made himself a promise. Someone in this family was going to finally win. He decided that someone was going to be him. On the surface, the house preached modesty. His mother would say things like, "We don't need to be rich, we just need to be comfortable." While his father loudly admired the neighbor's new car, the big house down the street, the guy on TV talking about making money in his sleep. Humility was the official family value. Envy was the unofficial hobby. So what really happened here is that he grew up bilingual in values. In public, you talk about stability, community, being a good person. In private, you keep score using bank accounts and square footage. That split would later become his entire brand. The founder who talked endlessly about serving users and changing lives, while quietly measuring his worth in headlines and valuation multiples. The escape hatch arrived in his teenage years in the form of a cheap, wheezing laptop. It wasn't much. Cracked corner, missing key, battery that died faster than his parents' business ideas. But it turned on, and that was enough. Late at night, when the house finally went quiet, he'd sit in the blue glow, teaching himself design and basic code, copying interfaces from big tech sites and trying to rebuild them pixel by pixel. For the first time, he had control. No landlord could raise the rent on a screen. No teacher could tell him what to build. He could take an idea in his head and make it real in a few hours. Those tiny side projects, ugly apps, half-broken tools he shared with a couple of online friends felt more solid than anything in his real life. This is a story of someone who didn't just want to get rich. He wanted to be remembered. He wasn't dreaming about a diversified portfolio or a nice stable business. He was replaying clips of Jobs holding up the iPhone, Musk unveiling a rocket, Bezos talking about day one. One product, one moment, one name that would outlive him. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because that dream quietly hardened into a rule. Walking away from his iconic product would mean walking away from his entire identity. And when the numbers later started screaming that the product wasn't working, he wasn't just fighting market reality. He was fighting his own childhood promise. In the next section, you'll see what happens when someone like that finally gets a company, a pile of money, and one big shiny idea to bet everything on. So when he finally got a little money and a blank calendar, he did exactly what his childhood promise trained him to do. He went hunting for the idea. The first serious attempt was, honestly, kind of clever. Imagine a smart shoe insole that tracked your steps, posture, and daily hustle score, then synced to an app that turned walking into a game. You'd compete with friends, unlock badges, maybe even earn discounts from brand partners who never actually existed yet. On a pitch deck, it looked like the future of fitness. In reality, it was a Bluetooth brick you had to charge every night. Still, he sold it. Not to customers, but to believers. A tiny pre-seed round from a local angel, a flattering blog write-up calling it Fitbit meets Fortnite, a few hundred sign-ups on a landing page. It felt rich in potential. The story sounded huge. The fundamentals? Those were pending. Launch day was supposed to be his coming-out party. He'd rented a small event space, dragged in friends, early testers, even a reporter who only came because there was free pizza. The plan was simple. Live demo the app, show the shoe data updating in real time, then open pre-orders. The problem was the shoes. Half the insoles wouldn't pair. The other half thought everyone was running a marathon while standing still. On screen, the live dashboard froze, then started spitting out random numbers like a slot machine. One tester took 3 steps, and the app proudly announced they'd burned 9,000 calories. People laughed. Not with him. He was humiliated, but also weirdly energized. Most people would have gone home and asked, "Is this a bad business?" He went home and asked, "Okay, what's the next big swing?" This is a story of someone who treated failure like a warm-up lap, not a warning. So what really happened here was not a lesson learned, but a pattern locked in. Every flop became proof that the real idea was still just ahead. Instead of tightening his process, he tightened his grip on the fantasy that one product would finally make all the childhood problems make sense. That's how you get to the baby knee pads. Yes, at one point, he seriously tried to launch padded leggings for crawling infants, branded as a performance safety system. He built a whole deck about protecting the next generation of innovators from impact trauma, like toddlers were training for the NFL. Friends smiled, nodded, and quietly refused to invest. The crazy part is, he could always get someone to lean in. His storytelling was that good. He'd pace a room, paint a future, connect it back to his childhood, and suddenly a smart shoe or a crawling pant sounded like a movement. However, behind the pitch, there were no real unit economics, no operational discipline, and definitely no boring financial model that survived contact with reality. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because that same mix, killer story, weak fundamentals, emotional overattachment, is exactly what he carried into the company that finally made it, and then burned itself down for one product. So if the early failures were the dress rehearsal, the next move was the big stage. He left the small city where everyone knew him as the ideas guy who always had a new side project and never a clear exit. One one-way ticket, 2 suitcases, and a half-burned savings account later, he landed in a real arena, a global tech hub where money, hype, and ambition leaked out of every overpriced latte. Back home, he'd been the smartest person in the room. Here, he was just another founder standing in line for coffee, sandwiched between a guy who'd just raised $50 million for an AI toothbrush and someone live-tweeting their Series B term sheet. The billboards weren't for local banks anymore. They were for unicorns, IPOs, billion-dollar valuations plastered on subway ads like movie posters. This is a story of a man who thought he was moving up in the world and instead discovered he'd only just reached the starting line. The culture shock hit fast. Meetups every night. Demo days every weekend. Co-working spaces filled with people pitching world-changing apps that mostly delivered groceries faster. In his childhood hometown, saying you ran a startup made you sound rich. Here, it just meant you owned a laptop and anxiety. He'd walk past the flagship stores of the companies he used to read about. Glass temples for phones, sneakers, and headphones, each one built around a single object that defined the whole brand. Not a portfolio. Not a messy collection of half-baked experiments. One product that everyone knew by name. The turning point came at a conference. A famous founder walked on stage to thunderous applause, not because they'd built a diversified empire, but because they were the person who made X. One device, one platform, one idea that rewired a category. Sitting in the cheap seats, he felt something sharp. Envy, admiration, and a quiet, uncomfortable question. Had he been thinking too small this whole time? So what really happened here is that the city didn't just change his address, it rewired his ambition. The safe plan, steady revenue, multiple product lines, boring profits, started to feel almost embarrassing. Why settle for a solid business when you could gamble everything on the product that might put your face on a keynote stage? As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, you'll see how that one thought infected everything. He stopped talking about options and started talking about legacy. Investors heard a new pitch, not a bundle of small wins, but a future flagship that would define an entire category. Inside his head, the diversified roadmap shrank to a single, glowing dot. And then came the night that sealed it. Cramped apartment, takeout containers on the floor, a cheap bottle of wine on the table. He grabbed a napkin, sketched a rough outline, part hardware, part software, all fantasy, and pushed it toward a friend. "This is the one," he whispered. The company didn't know it yet, but everything else had just become expendable. Across town that same week, someone else was staring at a very different napkin. Not a sketch of a glowing future. A spreadsheet, printed in grayscale, covered in tiny numbers and red flags. He circled one cell, frowned, and quietly thought, "This doesn't add up." His name was Daniel, and if the founder was a spotlight, Daniel was the guy checking the wiring so the lights didn't burn the place down. Where the founder's voice filled every room, Daniel's barely rose above the hum of a crowded co-working space. But he noticed everything. They met at one of those chaotic startup nights where the Wi-Fi barely works, but the ego density is off the charts. Folding chairs, warm beer, a pitch stage made from 2 pallets and blind optimism. The founder was on stage holding court, pacing like a TED Talk had crashed into a late-night infomercial. "This product," he boomed, "will redefine an entire industry. This is a story of changing how the world even thinks about work." People laughed, clapped, took photos. Daniel stood in the back, leaning against a pillar, mentally dividing projected revenue by actual market size. The numbers were ambitious, in a fun, slightly delusional way. After the talk, the crowd swarmed the founder like he was already rich. Everyone wanted in. Everyone wanted a piece of the dream, or at least a selfie with it. Daniel waited until the circle thinned, then stepped forward with the least sexy line in startup history. "Hey, quick question. What's your churn assumption on slide 12? The founder blinked. No one had asked that. People asked about vision, about brand, about how crazy big this could get. Not about the boring little numbers that decide whether you have a business or just an idea. That was the contrast. The founder was charisma, legacy, and volume. He talked about building a myth, a movement, a name that would outlive him. Daniel was systems, risk, and margin. He wanted something that could survive a bad quarter, not just a good headline. Both of them, however, came from the same raw material: scarcity. The founder's childhood was all instability and missed rent, answered with, "I'm going to be bigger than money itself." Daniel's childhood was similar chaos, but his response was the opposite. He learned to save, to plan, to build backups for his backups. One night, weeks later, they ended up in that same co-working space after everyone else had left. Empty desks, buzzing fluorescent lights, takeout containers again, because apparently no great startup ever discovered vegetables. They sketched for hours. Market maps, unit economics, infrastructure. They agreed on one thing instantly. Technology was going to reshape this industry, and fast. Where they disagreed, quietly at first, was on how much risk you take to ride that wave. The founder wanted to bet the whole house. Daniel wanted to keep at least one exit door unlocked. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, you'll see who won that argument. Spoiler, when the company later started selling off healthy divisions just to keep that one product breathing, Daniel was the one in the corner raising his hand, asking if maybe lighting the furniture on fire to stay warm was a bad plan. He saw the cracks early. He even tried to patch them. But in a culture built around a single charismatic voice, the quiet engineer of reality rarely gets the final word. And when the money really started burning, things would just get crazier and crazier. Before the bonfire, there was something almost reasonable. Years before the flagship product took over their lives, Alex and Daniel built a company that any boring adult in finance would have happily invested in. No messiah complex, no cult language, just a quiet little machine that turned software and service into money every single month. It started with a niche SaaS tool for mid-sized logistics companies, not self-driving trucks, not AI for the supply chain. A dashboard that made ugly back-office systems talk to each other so operations managers could stop living in spreadsheet hell. Glamorous? Absolutely not. Useful? Completely. Their first customer didn't arrive in a cinematic breakthrough. It arrived after 327 cold emails. Alex wrote most of them at 2 a.m., trying different subject lines like a stand-up comic bombing in an empty room. Optimize your freight workflows got ignored. You're losing money in the gaps between your systems. Finally got someone to reply. The demo was awkward. Alex oversold. Daniel undersmiled. The software crashed once. However, when Daniel calmly pulled up a backup environment and walked the client through how their real-time shipment data could finally sync with billing, you could see the operations director do the mental math. Save 3 employees worth of manual work? Reduce billing errors? He didn't care that the UI looked like it had been designed by a tired raccoon. He signed. From there, the model was simple. Alex hunted, Daniel farmed. Alex would hammer the phones, show up on Zooms with way too much energy, and refuse to end a call without a clear next step. Daniel built onboarding playbooks, standardized integrations, and quietly killed bugs at 3 a.m., so no one ever saw the chaos behind the curtain. This is a story of 2 very different skill sets accidentally forming a real business. Within 18 months, they had 23 customers on annual contracts. Churn was under 3%. Monthly recurring revenue ticked up with the predictability of a metronome. They layered in a managed services tier for "We'll just run this for you" clients, and a consulting arm that helped fix the messes their software exposed. 3 revenue streams, all profitable. No single client was more than 8% of revenue. In other words, they had exactly what investors claim to love: diversified income, healthy margins, and no obvious single point of failure. So what really happened here? Alex got bored. On paper, they were becoming rich in the least cinematic way possible. The company threw off steady cash. They could hire carefully. They could plan. But Alex started saying things like, "No one remembers the company that just makes operations slightly better," and "This isn't the thing people will write about." You can almost hear the ominous music starting. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, you'll see the hidden irony. The early company had all the safety features the later one ripped out: multiple products, paying customers in different industries, and a business that could survive a bad quarter without a prayer circle. They didn't lose it by accident. They walked away from it on purpose. Because soon, Alex would find the shiny idea he wanted the world to remember. And to feed it, something solid would have to die. It didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened in a crappy conference room that still smelled like the last tenant's burnt coffee. It was 9:47 p.m., 3 angry clients deep into a quick check-in that had become a group therapy session. Their dashboards didn't match. Their reports contradicted reality. One of them literally held up 2 laptops and said, "I pay you people so my team doesn't have to play software bingo." Alex watched their account manager apologize for problems they didn't cause, bouncing between 4 different tools just to answer a basic question: "How much did we make today?" That was the moment. Not a light bulb, more like a fuse. After the call, Alex didn't go home. He started pacing. Whiteboard, marker, red eyes. "This is insane," he kept saying. "Why does running a modern business still feel like using Windows 98 with prettier buttons?" He drew a big rectangle, then smaller boxes, then crossed them all out. No, one thing, one screen, one brain for the whole company. The pitch came out in a rush, a sleek, all-in-one control panel that would sit on every founder's desk. A single device that turned on and instantly showed revenue, customers, churn, runway, alerts, everything, in real time. No 10 logins, no exports, no Ask Finance, just the truth, on demand. "Think about it," he said. "You plug it in, it connects to all your tools, and every morning it glows green if you're okay and red if you're not. CEOs will sleep with this thing next to their bed." Sam listened, half impressed, half horrified. His brain did what founder brains rarely do in that moment. He ran the math. Custom hardware, integrations with every system on Earth, support, returns, inventory, money, lots of money. But the psychological hook was already in. This wasn't just another SaaS feature. This was a movie poster. You could see it in a keynote, sitting on a black table under a single spotlight while Alex walked around it like he'd invented fire. You could imagine it on billboards. Know your business in one glance. Investors wouldn't need a deck. They'd need a demo. And the story practically wrote itself. We're building the nervous system for modern companies. This is a story of killing dashboards, killing spreadsheets, killing chaos. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. But in that room, it all felt perfectly sane. Pattern interrupt. Remember the boring, profitable services business? In Alex's mind, it instantly became the prequel. Necessary for the lore, irrelevant to the sequel. He turned to Sam. We take the cash flow from services, we pour it into this, and in 2 years, we're not an agency. We're a product company. Magazine covers, keynotes, real rich. Sam paused. He knew the services side paid salaries, rent, the snacks their childhood friends stole from the office kitchen. He also knew you don't get on stage at tech conferences bragging about stable recurring implementation revenue. So we do it, he said slowly. But we ring-fence it. Budget cap. Separate team. Services can't bleed out for this experiment. Alex nodded. In that moment, the conditions sounded reasonable. They would not stay reasonable for long. Prototype mania started quietly. It would end up swallowing the whole business. They rented a cheap, echoey workshop 2 train stops from the real office. Concrete floor, flickering fluorescent lights, a door that stuck in the winter. It looked nothing like the glossy decks Alex had been showing investors. But inside that box, they convinced themselves they were building the future. Whiteboards filled up with arrows and acronyms nobody fully understood. 3D printed shells lined a folding table like a little graveyard of almosts. A half-assembled unit sat on sawhorses, wires spilling out like someone had mugged a server rack. Every night ended the same way. Cold noodles, warm energy drinks, and a Slack message at 2:47 a.m. saying, "One more change, then we lock it." They never locked it. This is a story of momentum that felt like progress. Sprints turned into marathons. Weekends blurred. They started joking that the flagship prototype was a jealous girlfriend because anytime someone tried to work on the steady, profitable legacy product, Alex would wander over and say, "Hey, can you just take a quick look at this bug?" That quick look always took 6 hours. Alex controlled the narrative like a pro. A board fried itself? Good. Means we're pushing the limits. Supplier backed out? Love it. If this were easy, anyone could copy us. A missed milestone that pushed launch back another quarter somehow became evidence the market isn't ready for how far ahead we are. So what really happened here was simple. Bad news didn't get solved. It got rebranded. Inside that rented box, this worked. It felt heroic. Outside, the numbers quietly stopped making sense. Sam noticed first. The ring-fenced budget leaked like a broken pipe. A small prototype line item became a color-coded forest on his spreadsheet. Contractors, new testing equipment, a second workshop, just for overflow. Timelines drifted. The profitable, boring business that had paid everyone salaries for years slipped to the bottom of meeting agendas, somewhere between office snacks and MISC. He'd bring it up. We're 3 months behind and 40% over budget. Alex would smile and say, "Perfect. That's what category creation looks like." As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, you can see how every rational concern got reframed as a lack of imagination. Then came the validation hit. A mid-tier tech blog did a breathless write-up after a carefully stage-managed demo. They called the prototype the missing layer between humans and data, which didn't really mean anything, but sounded rich and important. A viral tweet thread declared, "This company is quietly building the OS for reality." They won a small innovation award that came with a Lucite trophy and exactly zero money. Inside the workshop, it landed like a Series C. Screenshots went in the company Slack. Someone printed the headline and taped it above the coffee machine. The team started saying things like, "When this ships, everything changes," as if shipping alone would magically fix unit economics. Then, in a product review, an engineer cleared his throat and asked, "What if this doesn't work? Like, at scale?" The room went silent. Not because they had an answer, but because asking the question sounded almost offensive. For the first time, doubt wasn't a problem to solve. It was treated like betrayal. And from that moment, the prototype wasn't just a product. It was dogma. Things would just get crazier and crazier from there. Launch day looked like the ending of the story, not the beginning. They rented a minimalist theater, black walls, dramatic spotlights, the logo pulsing on a 20-foot screen like it was already a rich, global brand. The founder walked out in the uniform of every tech messiah in training: dark jeans, expensive but casual jacket, wireless mic, and way too much confidence for a product that had only survived a dozen stable demos. He didn't talk about features. He talked about destiny. This wasn't a tool. It was the future of how people will do X. He paced the stage, telling stories from his childhood about broken systems and big ideas, then casually dropped lines about reimagining the category like he was rearranging furniture. Then came the demo. Perfectly choreographed. Preloaded data, rehearsed gestures, zero live risk. On screen, the flagship product looked flawless. Tap here, magic happens there. The audience clapped at animations. One investor in the second row actually mouthed the word "crazy" in a good way. So what really happened here? Outside that room, reality was a lot less cinematic. The media did exactly what the PR team had paid them, briefed them, and flattered them to do. Headlines the next morning were breathless. "The future of X is here. This startup just changed Y forever. Meet the product that will kill Z." Early reviewers had spent maybe 40 minutes with a guided tour, but you wouldn't know that from the glowing write-ups about seamless experiences and category-defining design. On social media, it looked like they'd already won. Clips from the keynote went viral in their little corner of tech Twitter. Friends texted screenshots of trending charts. Employees were sharing posts like, "So proud to work with this team," under photos of the founder looking vaguely heroic in front of a slide that just said, "Believe." Inside the company, Slack was a fireworks show. However, when the dashboards finally loaded, the numbers told a colder story. Pre-orders were fine, not embarrassing, not historic. A solid mid-tier launch, the kind of thing most startups would quietly celebrate, then get back to work. Usage metrics spiked early, then flattened. Lots of curiosity, not a lot of deep adoption. People were signing up, poking around, and leaving polite little trails of data that basically said, "Interesting idea, not a habit." And then the complaints started. The product crashed under very normal workloads. Key features from the keynote were missing or half-baked. Pricing felt off, like they'd charged Future of X money for pretty good app value. Support tickets used phrases like, "Love the concept, but," which is corporate for, "I'm not paying for this twice." Leadership didn't see a warning. They saw a prophecy being confirmed. In the next all hands, the founder framed it as proof of concept. He pointed at the launch curve, circled the initial spike, and said, "This is what product market fit looks like on day one. Now, we just need to pour fuel on it. Any mention of churn or complaints got rebranded as data that will help us refine the story. The solution to every problem? More marketing, more features, more money. This is a story of selective vision. They had enough data to say, good start, not a revolution. Instead, they told themselves, inevitable dominance, just underfunded. Later that night, long after the last congratulatory email, the co-founder sat alone in a dark office, staring at the dashboard. The graphs weren't bad. They just weren't legendary. He clicked through segments, hoping some hidden cohort would explode off the screen and justify everything they were already starting to sacrifice. Nothing did. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, that quiet realization will matter, because the company won't slow down. It will double down. He didn't find a magic cohort in the dashboard, but someone else thought they saw something even better: a magic category. The first big investor meeting after launch looked nothing like the messy reality inside the product team. It looked rich. Polished deck, dimmed lights, catered sushi. Slide 1. A full-bleed glamour shot of the flagship product on a marble table, like a luxury perfume ad. Slide 2. A chart that started low left and ended high right, very fast, very green. No mention that most of the company's actual money was still coming from the boring old legacy business. When they talked about that side of the business at all, it was a throwaway line. "We've got this nice cash-generating base," the founder said, almost apologetic. "But the real upside is here." Click. Another glossy shot. Another carefully sliced metric. Conversion rate in the one segment that looked crazy good. A retention curve cropped before it started drooping. If you squinted, it looked like they already owned the future. And the investors? They weren't buying the numbers. They were buying the story. This is a story of a potential category killer, they told themselves, not a mid-sized company with a decent side hustle. They saw a charismatic founder with just enough childhood struggle in his origin tale to sound hungry, a simple idea they could explain to their own limited partners in one sentence, and a product that photographed really, really well. So what really happened here is they started mentally spending the exit before the ink was dry on the term sheet. The offer that landed on the table was huge. A big growth round at a head-spinning valuation, explicitly modeled on the flagship product ramping like a rocket. The term sheet didn't say, "You must ignore everything else," but it didn't have to. Board seats went to people whose whole pitch was scale, not balance. Growth targets were written only against flagship metrics. Hit these numbers, you're a legend. Miss them, we have problems. Inside the company, the language shifted almost overnight. In meetings, people stopped saying the company's name and started saying the product's name instead. The old business lines were now non-core assets. Leaders floated the idea of spinning them off like they were random garage sale items, not the thing keeping the lights on. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because the part that actually worked was suddenly treated like an embarrassing friend you pretend you don't know. The founder gathered the team in the all-hands space the day the round closed. Applause, champagne, phones out for Instagram. He smiled, lifted the mic, and said the line that made everyone cheer. "From now on, everything we do is about this product." Nobody realized they'd just heard the company's death warrant. The board would make sure of it in the very next meeting. Freeze that moment. Champagne in the air. Phones out. The founder on stage declaring the new religion of one product. Now imagine we hit pause right there and walk around the scene like it's a crime reconstruction. Because this is a story of a company that actually had options. Real, boring, healthy options. What if, instead of treating the flagship like destiny, they'd treated it like a bet? Same funding round, same cheering crowd, but a different sentence into the mic. From now on, this product is our biggest experiment, not our only future. Sounds less cinematic, right? Also way less crazy. The legacy business was still throwing off steady money. Customers liked it. It wasn't sexy, but it paid salaries on time and didn't set investor decks on fire. In the alternate timeline, they keep that engine running. They don't rip out the foundation to build a slide. They grow the flagship slower. Smaller launch, smaller promises, smaller burn. They try 3 different price points instead of one "we're going to own the category" sticker. They test whether it's a premium add-on for existing clients, a separate brand, or just one more product on the shelf. Investors would be looking at a very different animal. On paper, they'd see a real business with a moonshot sitting on top, not a moonshot pretending to be the whole business. That changes everything. The board isn't forced to defend an insane valuation on the back of one unproven idea. They don't need to push for land grab growth or demand hockey stick charts every quarter just to justify the last round of money. In that world, if the flagship stalls, annoying but survivable. You write down part of the investment, you pivot the feature set, you maybe spin it out or quietly bury it next to all the other failed products in corporate graveyards. Nobody has to sell off profitable divisions or fire hundreds of people just to keep life support running on one dream. So what really happened here? Identity walked in and flipped the table. The founder didn't want to be the person who built a solid, slightly dull company with a nice side product. That doesn't get you on magazine covers with your childhood friends texting, "You made it." They wanted to be the visionary behind the product. The one everybody in tech panels name drops. The one VCs brag about at dinner when they're trying to sound smart and rich. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. But the key shift already happened in that frozen frame. The company stopped asking, "Does this make the business stronger?" and started asking only one question: "Does this help the flagship product?" From here on, every hire, every firing, every asset sale, every late-night emergency meeting will be judged against that single line. And that's where the real damage begins. That question doesn't just guide decisions, it rewrites reality. The shift shows up first on the homepage. Overnight, the website stops looking like a company and starts looking like a shrine. New logo, new color palette, new tagline. Everything screaming one message: we are the product. The company name and the product name sit side by side in the header. Same font, same weight, like conjoined twins that never learned where one body ends and the other begins. Press releases repeat the new tagline until it sounds like a prophecy. Investor decks lead with the product, not revenue. Even the About Us page quietly changes from "We build products that" to "We exist to bring the product to everyone." Sounds small, right? However, this is a story of identity engineering, not just marketing. Inside the building, the language flips just as fast. People stop saying, "our products," plural, boring. They start saying, "the product," singular, sacred. You hear sentences like, "How does this serve the product?" and "We're all here for the product." No one is joking. It's capital P energy, like they're talking about a movement, a cause, or a slightly needy religion, not a SKU with a margin problem. New hires get the message on day one. The onboarding slide that used to show a portfolio of businesses now has a single, glossy hero shot. Legacy teams that still work on the old profitable stuff are introduced almost apologetically, like, "Oh, and we also have this, for now." As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, but the key damage is already done in their heads. Because once you talk about a product like it's a destiny, what happens when the numbers say it's just not? Who in that room is going to raise their hand and say, maybe the product isn't the future of the business? You're not just questioning a roadmap anymore. You're questioning the myth your friends have tied their careers to. Outside, customers and partners pick up the signal instantly. The market stops seeing a diversified company and starts seeing the X company. If the flagship app glitches, people don't say, "The app is buggy." They say, "That company is a mess." A bad quarter for the product becomes a referendum on the entire organization, and suddenly every negotiation, every partnership, every deal is priced like the risk is existential. And here's the psychological trap. When your brand is welded to one thing, killing that thing feels like killing yourself. It's not, "We're sunsetting a product line." It's, "We failed at the one idea we told the world would make us rich and change everything." For a founder who spent years telling that story on stage, that's not a pivot. That's a funeral. You can see the funeral starting in the smallest, quietest moment. In a back storage room, a veteran employee is told to clean up old collateral. They know what that really means. They open dusty boxes and pull out posters for the legacy business that used to pay the bills, brochures for services that still have customers, case studies with real money attached. One by one, they stack them in a gray bin marked recycling. No ceremony, no speech, just a slow erasing of evidence that this company was ever anything but the product. When they turn off the light and close the door, the hallway outside is lined with fresh banners for the new vision. The past is in the bin. The future is on the wall. And in the next phase, they're going to start paying for that choice in cash, credibility, and people. The past is gone. Now they have to believe in something new. Every Monday at 9 a.m., belief is scheduled on the calendar. The entire company is herded into the auditorium or onto a live stream. Lights down, music up, and then the founder walks on stage like he's about to drop a new album, not quarterly talking points. Behind him, 10-foot screens loop the same phrase in giant letters: one product, one future. He doesn't call it an all hands. He calls it alignment. As in, are you aligned with the vision or not? He paces, voice rising, talking about how this product is going to change the world, how they're not just shipping features, they're re-architecting human potential. Every few minutes, he throws out a slogan and waits. The crowd knows their lines. "What are we?" he shouts. "We are the product," they answer. It's corporate call and response, and here's where things will just get crazier and crazier. Because this isn't just hype anymore, it's social infrastructure. People clap every time the product's name is mentioned, not at the end of the speech, every single time. A slide comes up with the logo? Applause. Someone references a bug they fixed? Applause. One engineer later jokes that he started saying the name 3 times in a sentence just to test it. The room clapped 3 times. Language becomes a filter. Publicly asking, "Hey, are we sure this is the right direction?" is no longer a normal business question. It's a personality test. Skeptics are suddenly not believers who don't get the vision. In performance reviews, phrases like incredible culture fit and deeply aligned with leadership's optimism Start showing up next to the people who echo the founder's talking points verbatim. On Slack, the shift is even clearer. There's a Dharma product prayer channel where people post screenshots of good metrics with captions like, "Another miracle." Someone makes a meme of a competitor's app as a fossil in a museum with the caption, "Dinosaurs still exist." It gets pinned. If you suggest that the dinosaur just shipped a feature customers actually like, you don't get yelled at. You get ignored. Which is worse, some employees really do feel like they're part of something historic. One designer says, "I've never felt this kind of energy since childhood. It's like having a mission with your friends and getting paid for it." A sales lead talks about being all in on the product, like he's describing a relationship, not a job. For them, the rituals work. Others are quietly terrified. A data analyst admits to a colleague, "The numbers scare me, but I don't want to be the person who doesn't get it." Another says she rehearses her questions for days to make sure they sound curious, not negative. So what really happened here is that risk assessment didn't disappear. It just went underground. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, the line item on the P&L has turned into a sacred object. You don't critique it. You don't poke at the assumptions around it. You just protect it. At this point, suggesting the flagship might be flawed doesn't feel like feedback. It feels like heresy. And soon, they'll start excommunicating people for it. Inside the cult, faith is loud, but the numbers whisper. On paper, the flagship looks like a rocket ship. New signups are climbing. Daily active users are hitting fresh records, and some poor analyst has made a graph that shoots up and to the right so aggressively it practically leaves the slide. It feels rich. It feels like money. However, when you strip away the story and just ask one boring question, "Do we make anything per customer?" the whole thing starts to wobble. Let's break it down in human language. To get one new customer, they're spending, say, $120 on ads, discounts, and sales commissions. That customer pays $99 for the first month. Already underwater. Then you add in the cost to actually serve them. Cloud bills, third-party APIs, a support team that's drowning in tickets because the product just needs a bit more polish. Another $60, easy. So you've spent $180 to make $99, and that's before overhead. The only way this math works is if the customer sticks around for a long time. They don't. Churn quietly kills the dream. A huge chunk of users vanish after 3 months. The ones who stay mostly cling to the free tier because the paid version is fine, but not must-have. Conversion to paid sits in the low single digits. Margins are thin when they're positive, and flat-out negative when the company runs one of those crazy promo pushes the founder loves. At scale, the losses don't shrink. They compound. Yet if you walked past the big screens in the office, you'd think they were winning the internet. Dashboards glow with real-time signups, engagement minutes, feature usage. Someone even added confetti animations whenever a new milestone is hit. But buried 3 clicks deep is the chart that actually matters. Lifetime value versus customer acquisition cost. The lines never cross in the right direction. Leadership's answer: reframe everything. Losses are not losses. They're investment in category creation. Slow growth in paying users is proof we're still early in a massive TAM. A spike in cancellations becomes seasonality. Every negative trend is a blip on the way to inevitable dominance. This is a story of numbers being held hostage by narrative. Then comes the meeting. Finance and operations finally get a full hour on the calendar. They put up a simple slide. 5-year projection, conservative, base, and aggressive. In every scenario, The flagship never turned sustainably profitable without either doubling prices, slashing service quality, or cutting support to the bone. In other words, radical surgery. The room goes quiet. Someone from ops mentions competitors already eating their lunch. The head of finance carefully says the quiet part out loud. At current unit economics, the more we grow this, the faster we die. The founder smiles, brings up Amazon, talks about how Bezos lost money for years, reminds everyone that as we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier before they click. The slide deck gets closed. The story wins. Again. But there's one problem. The board has seen these exact numbers too. So what really happened here? Why do they keep signing off on budgets that pour even more of the company's lifeblood into a product the math says will never save them? Because from the outside, it doesn't look like madness. It looks like strategy. On the next earnings call, the tone shifts. The slides that used to show a neat little zoo of products now open with a single, glossy hero shot of the flagship. Executives repeat the same phrases like they've been printed on cue cards. Focusing on our core, doubling down on our highest conviction bet, aligning the business around our biggest opportunity. If you only half listen, it sounds disciplined, adult, almost boring. Analysts eat it up. One calls it a long overdue pivot to the crown jewel. Another research note praises management for exiting low-growth distractions to free up money for the category-defining product. On CNBC, a guest nods seriously and says, "This is the kind of focus Wall Street wants to see." The stock even pops a few percent. Apparently, killing your side hustles to bankroll your problem child now counts as responsible parenting. So what really happened here? Inside the building, this is not a pivot from strength. This is a scramble. The flagship is a cash furnace that still isn't throwing off enough revenue to justify its own hype. To keep feeding it, leadership starts quietly cannibalizing the healthier organs of the business. A boring but profitable services unit gets sold. A steady enterprise product that customers actually like is deprioritized. Teams that hit their numbers get told their headcount is being reallocated to strategic priorities. On paper, it's streamlining the portfolio. In the all-hands meeting, it's a slide with 3 polite bullets about focus, clarity, and operating leverage. But on Slack, employees translate in real time. We're shutting down profitable divisions to keep the flagship dream alive. The people in those divisions aren't non-core. They're friends who just got told their solid, boring work doesn't fit the new story. Here's the language gap in action. When the CEO says, "We're exiting low-growth segments," he means the product that paid the bills. When he says, "We're simplifying the business," he means there will be fewer places to hide from the flagship's problems. And when he says, "We're all in on this idea," what a lot of staff hear is, if this thing doesn't work, there is no plan B. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, the vocabulary gets cleaner while the reality gets messier. Pattern interrupt. If you muted the audio and just watched the numbers, you'd see a company getting less diversified, more fragile, and weirdly proud of it. Revenue streams shrink. Customer concentration rises. The fate of thousands of jobs gets tied to a single product curve that stubbornly refuses to bend up the way the deck promised. To Wall Street, this all scans as portfolio optimization, a tidy pivot, a smart exit from the past. Inside the company, it feels closer to ritual sacrifice. One product on the altar, and everything else laid down to keep its fire from going out. And the really crazy part? The ritual isn't over yet. The ritual isn't over. It's about to claim its first real victim. The company doesn't start by cutting the flashy labs or the overpaid brand consultants. No. The first thing they put on the chopping block is the boring machine that actually prints money. It's the Enterprise Solutions division, the one that sold unsexy software and long-term service contracts to banks, hospitals, and insurance companies. No hype, no keynotes, just quiet renewals and steady cash. For almost a decade, this unit had been the adult in the room, smoothing out cycles and paying for everyone else's big ideas. Inside, everyone knows the truth. This division is the golden goose. It delivers predictable margins, real profits, and customers who don't care about brand manifestos. They just want their systems to stay online. But on Investor Day slides, it's a tiny gray box in the corner. Non-core. Legacy. Strategic options under review. You can probably guess what happens next. Leadership gathers the top managers in a glass conference room and unveils the plan. They're selling the entire enterprise unit to a larger competitor. The spin is almost impressive. This is a focus move, a clean portfolio. The CEO explains that the sale will give them the runway to fully realize the flagship product's potential. If they can just get 18 more months of burn, the story goes, the curve will finally bend up. So what really happened here? A profitable, low-drama business is being liquidated to keep a loss-making darling on life support. This is a story of priorities and of executives who have publicly tied their legacy to one product they can't admit might just be fine, not world-changing. For the people who actually built the enterprise division, it feels like betrayal. These are some of the company's most competent operators, the ones who spent years fixing outages at 3 a.m., flying economy to grim conference centers, and closing seven-figure renewals without needing a TED Talk. Now they're told their work was never core to the vision. Many take the buyout. Some walk out angry. A few quietly join competitors and bring their best customers with them. Customers are confused too. They thought they were betting on a stable partner, not a startup mid-identity crisis. Account managers are suddenly explaining that, no, the product isn't going away. It's just going to live under a new strategic owner. You can almost hear the trust evaporating on those calls. And here's the financial irony that never makes the press release. That non-core division, it was subsidizing the flagship's losses the entire time. Its boring cash flows plugged the hole left by aggressive marketing, missed sales targets, and yet another visionary pivot. Once it's gone, the company isn't leaner and stronger. It's naked. Now, every bad quarter for the flagship hits the income statement like a truck. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Because if selling your only working engine mid-flight sounds insane, remember, they're convinced the experimental engine will kick in any second now. The question is, what happens when the pilot starts throwing passengers out to make the math work? That question gets answered in a beige conference room 2 hours outside the city. It's an executive offsite, but it feels more like a triage tent. Whiteboards are packed edge to edge with numbers, red circles around anything that looks like nice to have. And on the far wall, there's a giant cash burn chart that just keeps tilting down like a ski slope to zero. Every sticky note is a business unit. Every marker stroke is someone's job. They've written out the options in brutal, kindergarten simple language: cut marketing, slow hiring, sunset minor products. Or the one nobody wants to say out loud: reduce investment in the flagship. The product that made them rich on paper. The idea investors fell in love with. The only thing the outside world thinks this company actually is. On paper, each path has pros and cons. cut marketing and you protect runway, but growth stalls and Wall Street panics. Freeze hiring and you look disciplined, but everyone left starts doing 3 jobs. Kill off smaller products and you get quick money, but you also admit your big diversification story was basically fan fiction. Touch the flagship, however, and the whole story breaks. If that's not untouchable, what are they? Around the table, you can feel the split. The CFO is pointing at the chart, doing the deadpan math. At this burn rate, they've got quarters, not years. The operations lead is talking about real problems like support queues, angry customers, and a roadmap that's already on fire. A couple of VPs quietly float the unthinkable. Maybe the flagship gets slimmed down. Maybe it stops being the center of the universe. You can hear the air change. That's when the founder snaps in. No slides, no spreadsheet, just conviction. They say cutting the flagship is not an option, with the kind of certainty people usually reserve for gravity and death. This is a story of one product, they remind everyone, and the market just doesn't get it yet. Everything else is negotiable. This one thing is sacred. So what really happened here is not a rational portfolio review. It's a loyalty test. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, the logic gets crazier and crazier. Profitable side businesses are suddenly distractions. Experimental products are off mission. And the only true north is pouring more money into the one thing that's already sinking the ship. By the end of the day, the whiteboards look cleaner, and the future looks smaller. Budgets for R&D outside the flagship are slashed. Entire product lines are quietly shelved. Teams that spent years building their own roadmaps are told they're being redeployed to help the flagship hit its next impossible milestone, whether or not they've ever worked on anything like it. In the corner, the co-founder watches it happen. They realize the company they built with friends is gone. What's left is a support system for one increasingly fragile idea held together by belief and burn rate. And the real twist? The next crisis meeting is already on the calendar, and what they're about to sacrifice there makes this session look gentle. That next crisis meeting only makes sense if you understand one thing. It's not about the product anymore. It's about the psychology wrapped around it. This is where we hit pause on the boardroom drama and talk about sunk costs in plain language. The sunk cost fallacy is simple. Once you've poured time, money, and ego into something, it becomes harder, not easier, to walk away. You'd think new information would help people change course. In reality, every extra dollar and late night becomes one more reason to keep going. Think about it like this. If you've watched 3 boring seasons of a show, you'll watch a bad 4th one, because you've already come this far. That's sunk cost. Now scale that up to a company that's spent years, hundreds of millions of dollars, and its entire brand on one flagship product. Walking away doesn't just mean canceling a show. It feels like canceling your own judgment. Inside this business, leadership isn't just defending a product roadmap. They're defending their life story. They've told investors, employees, and their own childhood friends that this is the idea that will make everyone rich. So what really happened here is that every missed target, every ugly metric, stopped being a warning sign and started being a test of faith. Are you loyal enough to keep believing? And then it gets crazier. Because this isn't just sunk cost, it's identity fusion. The founder doesn't just run the company. In their head, they are the company. They are the product. The product is them. So when someone says, maybe we should kill this, it doesn't land like a spreadsheet suggestion. It lands like, maybe your entire career was a mistake. Who wants to vote for that in a meeting? As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, Things will just get crazier and crazier once you add group dynamics. Executives have gone on stage, on earnings calls, on CNBC, promising that this one product is the future. Employees have told their families they're working on the next big thing. Investors have written glowing memos about its inevitable success. At that point, who's going to raise their hand and say, "Yeah, we blew it"? Instead, they double down. They sell profitable divisions to fund it. They cut teams that actually work so they can hire more people around the flagship. Every sacrifice gets rebranded as focus. Every obvious red flag becomes temporary headwinds. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of rational decision-making. From this point in the story, you can't assume anyone is a calm, logical actor. If you do, the next decisions will sound insane. But if you understand how far people will go to protect their egos, their money, and their carefully crafted legend, everything the company is about to do will make a dark kind of sense. And in that next crisis meeting, you're going to see exactly how far they're willing to go. They didn't just tighten the belt in that crisis meeting, they started amputating limbs. The memo went out on a Friday afternoon, because of course it did. The future bets portfolio was being streamlined. Translation: anything that wasn't the flagship was now on the chopping block. The experimental mobile product that had doubled users 3 quarters in a row? Frozen. The partnership that would have put their tech in every major retailer's app within a year? Deferred. The tiny innovation lab quietly prototyping a next-generation version of the product that actually fixed the old problems? Disbanded. On paper, the logic sounded almost noble. Leadership told the company they couldn't afford distractions anymore, that every dollar had to go into finally making the flagship breakthrough. This is a story of how focus becomes a weapon when you point it the wrong way. The slide deck showed tidy charts: consolidate spend, align headcount, concentrate firepower. If they just poured everything into this one idea, they said, the payoff would be rich enough to save everyone. But as we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because some of the projects they killed were doing better than the sacred flagship ever had. One internal dashboard showed that a scrappy B2B tool built by a 6-person team in a corner of the office had higher retention, lower churn, and actual profit. Another prototype had early adoption curves that made investors' eyes light up in private demos. However, there was one big problem. None of them matched the founder's personal origin story. The flagship was the myth. It was the thing they'd talked about since childhood friends and dorm room fantasies. Killing it would mean admitting the legend was wrong. So instead, they killed everything around it. When someone pointed out in a meeting that the distraction products had better metrics, the response was almost spiritual. Those numbers were nice, but the flagship was who we are. How do you argue with a brand identity that's been elevated to religion? Inside the ranks, the mood split sharply by age. Younger employees looked at the roadmap and felt like they were watching their own future get erased in real time. Why were they canceling products their friends actually used? To fund a legacy app their group chats openly mocked. In Slack channels, people joked that the company had become a very expensive life support machine. Older employees didn't joke. They quietly updated resumes, took recruiter calls, and started talking in past tense. It was a crazy ride. It used to be a great business. They'd seen this movie before, and they knew how it ended. One insider later summed it up in a single line that still stings. We weren't just cutting costs, we were cutting off our own escape routes. And once you've burned every bridge to the future, what's left when the flagship still doesn't fly? What's left is the oldest trick in dying startups: Debt dressed up as destiny. The cost cuts bought them a few quarters, but they also created a new problem. With every division they sold, with every team they laid off, the company became less of a real business and more of a single, very expensive bet. One flagship product. One idea everyone needed to believe would make them rich again. So they hit the gas. Marketing went from "let's be smart" to "let's be everywhere." Billboards, influencer campaigns, promo codes that basically paid customers to pretend they liked the product. Discounts got so aggressive that sales teams joked they were selling dollars for 70 cents. Funny line, terrible unit economics. Infrastructure followed the same crazy curve. Data centers scaled up. Customer support was staffed for a future user base that only existed in pitch decks, and engineering kept building features to justify the story that this was a platform, not just a product. The monthly cash burn didn't just rise, it accelerated. Every chart in finance started to look like a ski jump. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Because when the cash in the bank couldn't keep up, they didn't change the strategy. They changed the funding. First came the credit lines. Just working capital flexibility, leadership said on the all hands, like it was a gym membership. Then convertible notes, sold as a clever way for new friends to join the cap table later, at a higher price, when the flagship finally hit escape velocity. After that, structured deals that brought in money now in exchange for revenue they hadn't earned yet. Future cash, pawned off to pay for present delusion. Internally, every one of these financings was framed the same way. Fuel for the rocket. This is a story of one last push, one more campaign, one more product refresh, one more quarter of burn before the magic flywheel kicks in. How many last pushes can you have before someone admits it's just pushing the same rock up the same hill? So what really happened here was a pattern. Each new pile of cash went into the same hole. More marketing, more subsidies, more infrastructure for scale that never came. The economics didn't change. The story did. Leadership quietly moved the goalposts from profitability next year to profitability at scale to profitability after we unlock the next market. By the end, the finance dashboard told the part no one wanted to read out loud. On one side, a neat little revenue line from the flagship, inching up like a polite staircase. On the other, 2 lines for debt and burn rate, shooting up like rockets. Somewhere out in the top right corner, those lines crossed in a bright red knot. Everyone saw it in meetings. Everyone nodded. And then, like friends pretending not to notice a house fire across the street, they went back to talking about the next big push. Everyone saw the chart. No one was supposed to talk about it. So the real conversations moved to the shadows. In the kitchen, 2 engineers waited for the espresso machine and whispered, "Are they looking at the same dashboard we are?" In encrypted group chats labeled with fake project names, people screenshotted churn curves and sarcastically added, "Inevitable success, right?" Anonymous posts on the internal forum asked if leadership had a different set of numbers or just a different relationship with reality. This is a story of a company where the official language was victory, but the native language had quietly become doubt. Engineers complained that obvious, ugly bugs in the flagship product sat in the backlog for months, while leadership pushed them to ship one more flashy AI-ish feature that looked great in a demo. "We're building fireworks, not foundations," one back-end dev wrote in a late-night rant that got 100 silent likes and 0 public comments. Everyone read it. Everyone pretended they hadn't. Sales teams felt it from the other side. Decks were rewritten weekly to promise capabilities that existed only in slideware and the founder's head. Reps were told to sell the vision, not the version, which sounded inspiring until customers started asking why basic promised features simply didn't work. Quotas went up. Close rates went down. Commissions got weird. So what really happened here when the only way to hit your number was to oversell a product you no longer trusted? Support was where the fantasy met gravity. The chat queues were permanently red. Tickets piled up from angry customers who had been sold the dream and received a beta. Support staff joked that their job title should be apology engineer. They begged product for fixes, begged sales to stop promising magic, and got invited instead to a new culture workshop about owning the customer journey. HR and leadership saw the same smoke and responded with incense. More slogans on the walls, more all hands about our sacred mission and protecting the soul of the product. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Instead of acknowledging the problems, they rolled out a Joy Score survey that asked employees to rate how inspired they felt. Posting about launches on social media. Low scores triggered not investigation, but coaching. One all hands became the turning point. A mid-level product manager, 3 years in, raised her hand and asked on the live stream, "If the flagship is healthy, why are we selling profitable units and taking on more debt just to fund it?" The room went quiet. The CEO smiled, called it a fear-based question, and pivoted into a 10-minute monologue about childhood dreams, category kings, and how friends don't abandon each other when money gets tight. People clapped because the cameras were on. After that, she wasn't fired. That would have been too obvious. She was just absent, removed from key projects, left off calendar invites, performance review, not fully aligned with the vision. Everyone noticed. The message was clear. Curiosity was a career risk. By then, a loose coalition of mid-level managers had had enough. Late one night, on yet another encrypted thread, they made a decision. They would go around the founder and take their concerns and their charts straight to the board. They thought the board would pull the emergency brake. They were half right. They expected a firefight. What they got was theater. The emergency board meeting was set for 8 a.m., but the real story started the night before, when finance printed out a deck that basically said, in polite corporate language, "The flagship is killing us. Revenue flat, discounts up, competitors eating their lunch, and yet 68% of all remaining cash and headcount still funneled into one product that had never actually made money." The charts didn't need commentary. They looked like a slow-motion car crash. Operations followed with their own horror movie. Support tickets piling up, outages every weekend, engineers burned out, profitable side products starved of staff so the flagship could get one last big push. One director even brought in an outside consultant, the kind of PowerPoint mercenary boards actually listened to. His conclusion was blunt. If they ring-fenced the flagship tomorrow and stopped feeding it, the rest of the business could be cash flow positive within 18 months. So what really happened here when those slides hit the boardroom screen? The founder walked in late, of course. Hoodie, sneakers, and the slightly offended look of someone who can't believe their friends are staging an intervention. While the CFO talked about runway and covenants, the founder didn't take notes. They watched the room, clocked which board members frowned, which ones stared at their phones, which ones looked quietly terrified about their own money. Then came the counterattack. The founder's deck opened with a different set of numbers, not the ugly cohort charts, but cherry-picked segments where usage was up 40% in our most engaged community. A testimonial video played of a beaming customer calling the flagship life-changing. There were heat maps, NPS scores, and a slide literally titled "On the Cusp." According to this vision, the problems were not about the product. They were about timing, about macro headwinds, about needing just a bit more fuel for the rocket. And the board wanted to believe. This is a story of sunk reputations as much as sunk costs. Several directors had led the early rounds. Their funds had bragged about this bet in pitch decks to limited partners. One had the flagship's logo framed in his office like a childhood trophy. Admitting the product was dragging the company under would mean admitting they'd backed the wrong idea in public with receipts. So the questions they asked weren't, "Should we shut this down?" They were, "How fast can we get to the breakthrough?" And, "What if we double down on enterprise?" Pattern interrupt. Not one director seriously pressed the consultant scenario where the company survived without the flagship. That option just slid off the table. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Instead of forcing a strategic reset, the board drafted a statement of full confidence in leadership. They approved a new budget that cut back everything else and shoveled even more cash, people, and time into the flagship. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of governance. In theory, the board is the brake pedal. In practice, this one handed the driver a sharper knife and said, "Keep going, we're almost there." The only group that could have stopped the company from killing itself didn't just look away. They helped aim the final blow. And the employees watching from the outside? They finally understood. If the board wouldn't save them, no one would. And here's the uncomfortable part. This board wasn't some bizarre outlier. They were playing a very common game in modern business. So let's hit pause on our main story for a second and look at 3 other companies that did the exact same dance. Different industries, different founders, same cult of the product. First, a tech firm that should have lived forever. For years, it made boring but beautiful money, selling stable enterprise software and services. Slow growth, long contracts, happy corporate clients. Then a new CEO arrived with a crazy idea. Forget the old stuff. We're going to build the iPhone of smart home devices. Overnight, the company sold off entire enterprise units to bankroll this shiny consumer hardware moonshot. They poured hundreds of millions into design, marketing, celebrity endorsements. The launch? Huge buzz, glowing reviews, and then nothing. Customers didn't buy enough, returns were high, margins were awful. The device flopped, the stock tanked, and without those steady enterprise contracts, there was nothing left to cushion the fall. This is a story of a company that traded a durable, slightly boring future for one roll of the dice. And the dice came up snake eyes. Second, a media company that decided it was Netflix or bust. For decades, it printed magazines, syndicated shows, licensed characters. Not sexy, but those licenses threw off rich, predictable money. New leadership walked in and basically said, "If we're not a streaming platform, we're dead." So they gutted print, starved licensing, and shoved everything into one all-in streaming app. Massive content costs, expensive tech, giant marketing campaigns promising the next big platform. The problem? The audience never showed up at scale. They were paying blockbuster bills on an indie film subscriber base. By the time they admitted it, the old businesses were gone, and the future was a cash-burning black hole. Third, a consumer brand that had a whole aisle in the supermarket. Multiple strong product lines, loyal buyers, retailers who liked stocking them because everything just sold. Then a new, revolutionary product arrived. Leadership fell in love. They called it the future of the category, killed off older lines to clear shelf space, and forced retailers to take big positions in this one item. Customers tried it, shrugged, and went back to what they liked before. Except those favorites had been discontinued. Retailers were furious, shoppers felt betrayed, and the brand went from trusted friend to weird stranger almost overnight. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, the pattern gets clearer. In every case, leadership tied their personal legacy to one product. They ignored data, ignored internal warnings, and sacrificed diversified revenue to chase a clean, heroic narrative of singular greatness. One product to save the world, one idea to prove they were visionaries. So what really happened here with our main company isn't just that they made bad bets. They were operating in a system that rewards exactly this kind of self-destructive focus. And in the next part, you'll see how far they were willing to go to keep feeding that one product, even as everything else around it caught fire. Outside the burning house, something awkward was happening. The neighborhood moved on. While this company was busy selling its future, its people, and its reputation to protect one world-saving product, competitors quietly did something far less dramatic. They just copied the good parts. One rival took the flagship's slick interface and onboarding flow, stripped out the bloated features, and delivered the same core value at half the price. Another skipped copying entirely and leapfrogged the whole idea with a simpler, subscription-based model that didn't need a cult to sell it. What had once been pitched as a revolution now looked like homework someone else had already turned in, but cleaner. Customers felt that shift before anyone on the inside would admit it. At launch, using this product made early adopters feel rich in status and ahead of the curve. It was the thing you bragged about to friends, the shiny icon you showed off in meetings. A few years later, the same features were table stakes. The dashboard that once felt futuristic now felt like an overcomplicated cockpit compared to a rival's 3-button app. New buyers would try the demo and ask, "Wait, why do I need all of this when that cheaper one just works?" Inside the company, however, the story hadn't changed at all. Leadership still talked like category kings. On earnings calls, they cherry-picked one favorable region, one lucky quarter, one big client renewal, and held it up as proof that they were winning. They ignored the charts where market share was sliding, quarter after quarter. They zoomed in on a tiny uptick in usage while competitors were doubling their user base. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Because the worse the numbers got, the more confident the language became. There was a particularly brutal moment that cut through the fantasy. For years, a major retailer had given the flagship product prime shelf space and co-branded marketing. It was the kind of partnership they bragged about in every deck. Then, one quarter, quietly, the retailer's new catalog came out. The flagship was gone. In its place, a rival's product, same category, brighter packaging, better price. No big announcement, no angry breakup, just replaced. Internally, they called it a strategic reset and insisted the relationship was still strong, but everyone could read the shelf. A few months later, an enterprise client that had been with them since the early days signed a multi-year deal with a newer competitor. This was the client leadership always name-dropped when they wanted to prove they were indispensable. Suddenly, the indispensable product was optional. So what really happened here was simple. The market decided the flagship was no longer the default. For a normal business, this would be the moment to pivot, to rethink the idea itself. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of a company that did the opposite. Their next move wasn't to adapt. It was to burn even more of itself just to keep that one fading product on life support. So if the market had voted against the flagship, why didn't the company listen? Because instead of killing the product, they started killing everything around it. The first sign didn't look like blood. It looked like an email. A company-wide message dropped at 7:12 a.m., full of soft words and hard consequences. Leadership talked about right-sizing, focusing on our core mission, and aligning resources with our long-term vision. Not a single use of the word layoff. However, 10 minutes later, people's calendars started to explode. Back-to-back 15-minute one-on-ones. Quick sync. Org update. Catch up with HR. Everyone knew what that meant. You don't need childhood trauma to recognize a breakup meeting when you see one. Slack went silent. Friends who usually spammed memes were suddenly typing, deleting, typing again. When the cuts hit, they weren't random. They were surgical. Entire teams that worked on anything not touching the flagship were wiped out in a week. A profitable tools group that quietly threw off real money, gone. The experimental B2B unit that had actual contracts and happy customers, gone. Meanwhile, the flagship floor looked like a different planet. They were hiring. This is a story of a company that treated people like fuel for one burning idea. Engineers who kept legacy systems alive for years were escorted out with cardboard boxes, while just down the hall, recruiters were scheduling interviews for Senior Growth Lead, Flagship Experience. Same building, completely different reality. You can see the human cost in one simple contrast. There was Carla, who had been there almost from the beginning. She helped build the original business when the flagship was still a side project on a whiteboard. She'd stayed through the chaotic growth, the late-night launches, the broken coffee machines. That Monday, she got the org update invite. 15 minutes later, her access was gone. 3 days after Carla left, a newer hire on the flagship marketing team posted photos from a rooftop launch party. Neon logo, signature cocktails. Caption: "So proud to be part of this rocket ship. We're just getting started." People who had worked with Carla for a decade watched that post from their couches with severance PDFs open on their laptops. Inside, morale didn't just dip, it imploded. The people who survived felt like they'd won a lottery they didn't buy a ticket for. Survivor's guilt mixed with raw fear. Every all hands started sounding the same. Stay positive. Believe in the vision. If we all row in the same direction, we'll come out stronger. Translation: complain and you're on the next spreadsheet. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because the official story kept getting brighter while the hallways got emptier. On earnings calls, executives bragged that the company was leaner and more focused than ever, as if they'd just finished a fun productivity workshop. Inside, it felt like a skeleton crew propping up a product that was already past its prime. So what really happened here was not a clean reset. It was the first real sacrifice. And the people still left in the building were about to find out what the second one looked like. Outside the building, the story was about to flip. The same press that once called this flagship the future of everything suddenly had a different angle. The company that sold its soul for one product. That was the headline on the first big piece, a long-form investigation in a magazine that used to put the founder on glossy covers and call them a visionary. This time, the photo was darker, less savior, more cautionary tale. The reporter had done their homework, leaked slide decks, late-night emails from panicked finance staff, interviews with engineers who'd left after their stock options turned into confetti. They walked through how the company had quietly sold off a boring but profitable enterprise tools division just to keep pouring money into the flagship. even as sales were flat and competitors were eating their lunch. Inside the piece, the numbers told a different story from the earnings calls. Internal projections showed year after year of hockey stick growth that never materialized, while public statements promised inevitable category dominance. One former PM described roadmap meetings as a ritual where reality went to die. Another called the culture cult-like and detached from reality, saying it felt less like a business and more like protecting the founder's favorite childhood toy. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. The article revealed that the company had sold a data analytics unit that actually made money, laid off support teams that kept other products alive, and even taken on high-interest debt. Also, the flagship could keep burning cash on celebrity endorsements and glossy innovation summits. So what really happened here, according to the piece, was simple. Every rational option was on the table, except admitting the big idea might be wrong. Leadership's reaction? Pure denial. The CEO went on TV and called it hit journalism, written by people who don't understand our vision. Inside, an all-hands memo landed in inboxes, warning employees not to believe everything you read, and insisting the company was on the verge of a major inflection point. They doubled down on the same lines about runway, optionality, and the flagship's massive untapped upside, as if repeating the words could make the charts go up. Did investors buy it? Some did, or at least they pretended to. A few funds quietly trimmed their positions. Others started pushing for governance enhancements and portfolio rationalization, which is investor speak for, please stop lighting our money on fire. Behind closed doors, there were tense calls about whether it was time to kill the product. But almost nobody wanted to be the first to publicly say, "This thing we hyped for years? It's broken." And that's the twist. The outlets that once breathlessly declared this a revolutionary platform now framed it as a case study in how cheap money and obsession can hollow out a company from the inside. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of a business that believed its own press, right up until the press turned. So let's flip this around for a second. You're not just watching this story anymore. You're in it. You're sitting on the board of a company that used to look rich on paper, with a portfolio of products, real revenue, and glossy conference keynotes about owning the future. And in front of you is a memo that quietly admits what the press is only starting to hint at. The house is burning, but the founder is still bragging about the curtains. Here's the situation in that memo. One flagship product with huge brand recognition. Everyone knows the name. It's the thing journalists write about, the thing your friends ask you about at parties. However, the economics are terrible. Customer growth has stalled, margins are upside down, and every new feature costs more money than it brings in. To keep it alive, the company has already gutted almost everything else. Profitable side businesses? Sold off. Stable enterprise contracts? Wound down. Entire teams that had nothing to do with the flagship. Laid off in strategic refocusing rounds. Debt is rising. Cash burn is crazy, and the only constant is a founder who treats this product like a firstborn child from their childhood, not a line item on a spreadsheet. And that founder is looking you in the eye saying, "We're so close. One more version, one more marketing push, one big partnership. We can't quit now." So what are your options sitting in that room? Option 1. You shut it down or spin it off. You ring-fence the flagship, sell it, license it, or just pull the plug and save what's left of the company. Option 2. You replace leadership, betting that a new CEO will do what the current one emotionally can't. Option 3. You keep funding the dream, hoping for a miraculous turnaround or a rich acquirer who somehow ignores all the red flags. If you were on that board, when would you have pulled the plug? Back when competitors first started overtaking it? When you sold the last profitable division just to feed this thing? When the debt covenant started to wobble? And more importantly, would you really have had the courage to do it while a charismatic founder is pacing the room? Investors are dialing in from private jets, and everyone is still pretending this is a temporary dip. Because, so what really happened here? In real life, most boards don't choose courage. They choose comfort. They delay. They approve incremental cuts. They ask for another scenario plan. They convince themselves that as we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier for a little while, before magically getting better. They secretly pray for a white knight. Some buyout, some strategic partner, some bigger fool with more money. In this story, that white knight never shows up. And the longer the board avoids confronting reality, the more time the company has to finish sacrificing itself for one product. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of a business that couldn't bring itself to say one simple word: stop. By the final year, the company org chart looks less like a business and more like a conspiracy board. Red string everywhere, all of it leading back to one box in the center, the flagship product. Once, there were whole departments with their own P&Ls, pet ideas, and internal politics. Now, almost every team reports into that single product in some way. Sales is product sales. Support is product experience. Even data science has been renamed product intelligence, which sounds rich for a company that can't predict its own runway. The only things not tucked under the product umbrella are three skeletal functions: finance, HR, and legal. And even they mostly exist to process terminations, negotiate debt, and make sure nobody says the quiet part out loud in writing. Follow the money, and the picture gets even clearer. A huge majority of the remaining capital is earmarked for product development, performance marketing, and sales incentives tied directly to that one product. Engineers are promised retention bonuses if they ship the next release. Sales reps get extra money only if they push the flagship, even when a cheaper legacy offering would actually solve the customer's problems. There is effectively no budget for diversification, no serious R&D outside the core, and almost nothing for contingency planning. Why save for a rainy day when you've already decided the sun is guaranteed to come back next quarter? Day-to-day life reflects that bet. Employees are working brutal hours to hit targets everyone knows are fantasy. Roadmaps get rewritten in late-night meetings. Weekends disappear into all-hands war rooms, where people debate whether to cut yet another feature to hit a performance deadline. Every outage becomes a 5-alarm fire drill. Every angry tweet from a power user triggers a Slack channel with executives lurking, asking, "Can we fix this before it hits the press?" The emotional weather inside the building swings hard. One strong demo and people start talking like they're back on a rocket ship. One lost deal and it feels like the end. Everything is riding on the next quarter, then the next launch, then the next partnership announcement. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, the definition of next keeps shrinking. First, it's 12 months, then 6. Then, if we don't hit April, we're done. Outside, however, the messaging is still pure TED Talk. Earnings calls are full of long-term vision and multi-decade transformation. Investor decks show neat timelines stretching to 2035. The CEO talks about building a platform for generations, while employees quietly wonder if they'll still have health insurance by Christmas. It's a surreal disconnect. This is a story of a company that publicly speaks in centuries and privately thinks in payroll cycles. So what really happened here? The moment it becomes clear the company will not survive doesn't come from a spectacular product failure. It comes from a spreadsheet. A simple, ugly, unavoidable spreadsheet that finally strips the story of its magic tricks and shows, in black and white, when the money actually runs out. And when that spreadsheet lands on the table, things will just get crazier and crazier. The spreadsheet didn't scream. It just sat there, glowing on a conference room screen, while a handful of very tired people realized the business they'd spent their lives on was already over. This wasn't the usual theater. No all hands, no hype music, no founder pacing around with a crazy new idea about unlocking trillion-dollar markets. It was 6 people, bad coffee, and a finance deck that finally used realistic numbers instead of faith. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, the room actually gets quieter. The CFO starts with the context slide. Revenue from the divisions they'd sold off to keep the flagship alive? Gone. The stable enterprise unit that once paid for everyone's free snacks and inspirational posters? Sold last year to make a debt payment. The small but profitable services business that quietly threw off cash? Spun out to focus on the core. In other words, every boring thing that used to keep the lights on had already been sacrificed at the altar of one product. Then they flip to the covenant schedule. This is the part founders love to ignore. Dates, ratios, triggers. If they miss any of these, the lenders can basically show up and take the keys. The model now includes the latest interest reset, the actual churn rate, and the fact that competitors have eaten into their once glorious growth curve. No more hockey stick. Just a sad, drooping line. But the real punch in the face is the key slide, the one built around the flagship product's best-case scenario. Not the fantasy one the founder used on stage. The one the finance team put together after 3 weeks of arguing with sales, product, and reality. It says, even if the flagship grows faster than any year in company history, even if margins magically double, even if every marketing dollar works like it did in their childhood pitch decks, the product still doesn't throw off enough cash, fast enough, to service the debt and fund operations. Not in 12 months, not in 24. Ever. Silence. Someone exhales hard enough to count as a swear. Another person actually does swear, quietly, into their notebook. Then the co-founder, the one who still has friends in every department, finally says the sentence nobody wanted to say out loud. We can't grow our way out of this. So what really happened here? This is a story of a company that kept betting the same number even after the roulette wheel had moved to a different table. The founder tries one last sprint away from reality. What if they do another round of cuts? Another lean phase? Another giant marketing push to reignite the brand? Maybe a rich strategic partner, a Hail Mary deal where some bigger player pays to plug the flagship into their ecosystem. The CFO just shakes their head. There's nothing left to cut that isn't already tied to the flagship. Every remaining team, every last dollar of burn is wrapped around this one product's throat. So now the choice is brutal and simple. Kill the product to try to save the empty shell of a company, or accept that the company dies so the product can live on in someone else's hands. And in the next phase of this story, they actually pick one. They don't pick the company. They pick the product. Inside the boardroom, it doesn't start as a dramatic sacrifice. It starts as a spreadsheet debate. One group of executives is staring at runway models saying, if they kill the flagship now, they can freeze burn, keep some cash, and rebuild around. The boring but actually profitable side businesses. Fewer headlines, fewer dreams, but maybe a smaller, sustainable company crawling out of the wreckage. The other camp looks at that plan and basically says, "So, what are we then?" Without the flagship, there's no brand, no story, no reason any investor would care. You're just another mid-tier software vendor or services shop trying to sell maintenance contracts while pretending this wasn't once a would-be unicorn. To them, shutting down the product is like erasing the entire reason the business existed in the first place. In the middle of this is the founder, and their position is even more extreme. They don't just want the product to survive inside the company. They want the product to survive even if the company flatlines. They talk about it less like a SKU and more like a child. It's their life's work, the thing they pitch to friends in cramped apartments, the thing that made investors rich on paper. So what really happened here is that the founder quietly redraws the goal. Save the product, not the corporation. They start floating options that sound noble on the surface, but carry a quiet edge. If they can't raise, maybe they spin the product out. Maybe they sell the IP to a bigger player. Worst case, they open source it, let the code live on in the wild. To an engineer, that sounds romantic. To an employee wondering about rent, it sounds a lot like, "We'll die for the idea, but good luck with your severance." Leadership eventually makes the call. Every remaining negotiation, every late-night call with bankers and would-be acquirers is optimized for one outcome: keep the flagship alive somewhere. They shop it to anyone with a balance sheet. They argue over IP carve-outs and license rights, while HR is quietly Googling how to run a layoff with no money. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because the healthier choice for the company is on the table, and they walk right past it. You can see the choice in the language. Internal emails obsess over the future of the product, the roadmap, the next chapter for the platform. There's far less about retraining, job placement, or winding down cleanly. People get FAQ docs about feature continuity before they get clear answers on health insurance. It's a story of priorities, and the priority is not the people who built the thing. Most companies kill failing products to save themselves. This one killed itself to save a failing product. On paper, this was supposed to be the victory lap: roadshow decks, glossy sizzle reels, bankers whispering about a multi-billion-dollar valuation. The company walked into its IPO process acting like the flagship product wasn't just a line of business, it was the crown jewel of a future empire. Investors were initially polite, curious even. They'd heard the story already. This one idea had redefined the category, built a movement, created a new way for people to work and learn and connect. But when they opened the numbers, the mood changed. Revenue concentration around a slowing product, declining growth. No clear path to profitability that didn't involve either cutting the flagship to the bone or finally admitting it would never throw off real money. Behind closed doors, the questions got sharper. If this is the jewel, why is it losing shine? Why are competitors growing faster with less spend? Why did you sell profitable divisions to fund something that still burns cash? The executives tried to spin it. Temporary headwinds, a misunderstood business model, the inevitable success of the platform once it scaled into maturity. So what really happened here is that public investors did what the company's own board hadn't. They called the bluff. The turning point came fast. One week, the bankers were talking about pricing windows. The next, the IPO was postponed to some vague future date that everybody in finance knew meant never. A major late-stage funding round tied to that listing quietly evaporated. Credit lines got tighter. Ratings agencies started circling, downgrading the debt and making it crazy expensive to borrow more. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Because instead of finally sacrificing the product, the company sacrificed itself. Emergency board meetings stretched late into the night. Advisors laid out the options, none of them good. A structured sale, a prepackaged bankruptcy, a fire sale of remaining assets to keep the flagship servers on for a few more quarters. Lawyers and restructuring consultants effectively took over. Internally, people stopped talking about roadmaps and started talking about runway. Externally, the language got very careful. Press releases about exploring strategic alternatives, emails about an orderly transition for all stakeholders. No one wrote the word collapse, but everyone could read it between the lines. Employees didn't get the full story from leadership. They got it from push alerts. One morning, headlines about bankruptcy filings and emergency financings hit phones before internal town halls were even scheduled. Slack channels filled with shock, anger, and links to the same 3 news articles. Some people learned their employer was finished while they were literally in a sprint planning meeting. How's that for agile? Customers scrambled. Would their access be cut off next week? Next month? Ever? They dug through FAQ pages that were somehow very precise about how long the product would stay online, and very vague about refunds or data portability. Investors, suddenly camera-shy, issued stiff statements about disappointing outcomes and valuable lessons, trying to sound wise instead of blindsided. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of a company that didn't just run out of money. It ran out of things it was willing to sacrifice that weren't the flagship. Every asset, every side business, every backup plan had already been sold, spun, or shut down to keep that one idea alive. By the time the IPO dreams died and the bankruptcy paperwork was filed, there was nothing left to trade except the company itself. And they made that trade. When you trade the company itself, someone still has to pay the bill. And this is where the story stops being crazy in a fun way and starts feeling a lot darker. First, the people who actually built the thing. Employees who spent nights and weekends keeping that flagship product alive open their inbox to a different kind of notification, a calendar invite with HR. Severance looks like a spreadsheet version of the caste system. Senior managers walk away with 6 months of pay, extended healthcare, maybe even outplacement coaching. The customer support rep who joined right out of college. 2 weeks of pay and a PDF of job search tips. Some contracts quietly exclude healthcare continuation for non-critical roles, which is a wild phrase to read when you're the one answering the phones. Then comes the really awkward part. The acquirer only wants the golden child, so a subset of engineers, designers, and product managers get polite emails saying, "Congratulations, you've been selected," to keep doing exactly what you were doing, just under a new logo. Everyone else who worked on the distractions that kept the lights on, they're thanked for their service and dropped into a job market now flooded with their own friends and coworkers. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, the loyalty chart looks upside down. Investors, of course, do not experience this equally. Early backers who sold chunks of their stake during the hype years quietly cash out with not bad considering money. They're not rich like the pitch deck promised, but they're not ruined either. Late-stage investors who wired in hundreds of millions at peak valuation are staring at cap tables that now read like a bad joke. They get pennies on the dollar, if that. And then there are the insiders with the really good term sheets. Side letters, liquidation preferences, and rights to specific asset sales mean a tiny group gets paid out from the last remaining IP, while everyone else argues over crumbs. So what really happened here? Risk was shared on the way up. Protection was very carefully reserved for the way down. Executives land somewhere even softer. A handful are kept on with retention bonuses to stabilize the transition, which is corporate for "please don't leave before we hand this product over." Others slide into consulting agreements, billing hourly to explain problems they helped create. The same leaders who preached "we're a family" on stage now negotiate personal bridges, while rank-and-file staff refresh LinkedIn, wondering how they went from mission-driven to disposable in one board vote. This is a story of who actually gets saved when a business is on fire. And at the very bottom of the waterfall, you find the people with the least leverage: small agencies left with unpaid invoices, landlords stuck with half-finished build-outs, vendors who extended friendly terms because they believed the hype and the childhood friends in a garage origin story. They get emails from restructuring lawyers, not money. Years of litigation follow over what's left: a patent portfolio, a brand name, maybe some code. Everyone lines up in court to argue why their contract should matter more than the next person's. The moral contrast is brutal. The people who believed the vision the most, the employees who evangelized the product, the small partners who bet their own businesses on it, pay the highest price. The ones with the best lawyers, the sharpest term sheets, and the least emotional attachment walk away bruised but intact. And yet, buried in those same contracts and carve-outs is the setup for one last twist in this saga. Those contracts and carve-outs had one job: make sure that when the company finally flatlined, the flagship didn't die with it. So what really happened here when the dust settled? In the bankruptcy filings, the product wasn't treated like just another line item. It was the crown jewel. A mid-tier tech conglomerate, think we buy distressed brands and plug them into our machine, stepped in and acquired the IP, the brand, and a chunk of the engineering team for what insiders quietly called a rounding error compared to the billions that had been burned to build it. Publicly, the new owner talked like a savior. They promised to unlock the product's full potential, leverage our existing customer base, and finally give this incredible idea the resources it deserves. It sounded rich, coming from a company that specialized in buying tired software and running it on autopilot for cash. But on the earnings call, analysts nodded. A cheap asset, a recognizable name, and no need to explain the crazy history. Easy win. Behind the scenes, the second life was less dramatic. The product kept its core name for about 6 months. Then it was quietly rebranded as a module inside the acquirer's larger platform. Same codebase, same weird little quirks, but now you accessed it through a bland dashboard with a corporate logo instead of the cult-like branding that had promised to redefine the future of human collaboration. This is a story of a once messianic product becoming a feature toggle. Did it finally hit the scale everyone sacrificed for? Not really. Under new ownership, costs were slashed, support was standardized, and sales teams bundled it into bigger deals. On paper, it was profitable for the first time in its life. However, profitable here meant a nice mid-single-digit line on a quarterly report, not the world-eating platform the original founders had pitched to their friends, investors, and anyone who would listen. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier in how ordinary it all looks. A few thousand loyal users stayed. They were genuinely happy the product survived the funeral, posting on forums about how, at least it still works, and swapping tips to avoid the new paywalls. Others were furious. Features they loved were killed. Pricing changed. The once responsive team was replaced by a generic support queue. And then there was the biggest group of all. People who had already moved on long before the collapse and barely noticed the acquisition. So in the end, the product didn't die. It just shrank. It went from, "This will change everything," to, "This helps our enterprise retention by 1.3%. If you knew that was the destination, a modest survival, a quiet feature inside someone else's stack, would you still think it was worth killing an entire company and thousands of careers just to keep that one product on life support? For some people inside, the answer is still yes. They would do it again. That's the uncomfortable part of this story. Because when a company kills itself to save one product, the product isn't the only thing people were worshipping. Let's start with the founder, the high priest of the roadmap. Publicly, the next chapter looks very reasonable. Conference stages instead of all hands, carefully worded Medium essays about lessons learned, and misaligned incentives. In interviews, he reframes the collapse as a noble experiment, a necessary overcorrection in a crazy market. You'll notice the language shift. Fewer destiny speeches, more talk about optionality and portfolio construction. Behind the scenes, the money didn't exactly evaporate. Early secondaries, that quiet consulting deal with the acquirer, a couple of angel checks that hit. So he slides into a comfortable blend of investing and philanthropy. A climate fund here, a scholarship program there. It's very tasteful, very grown up. If you only met him now, you'd never guess this is the guy who once told a room of sleep-deprived product managers they were guardians of the future of human collaboration. The co-founder's path is different. Less messiah, more mirror. They start doing long, slightly awkward podcast interviews where they admit they ignored red flags. They talk about their childhood, about wanting to build something their friends would be proud of, about waking up one day and realizing the entire business was just orbiting a single feature. On LinkedIn, their new roles are operational: COO, head of strategy, advisor. Solid jobs, boring on purpose. In boardrooms now, they're the first one to ask, what happens if this flagship fails? They refuse to join any company where one product owns the entire identity. It's almost a superstition, but it's also self-defense. Then you have the faithful. The true believers who wore the hoodies, quoted the vision deck, and genuinely thought this app or platform or device would change the way humans connect. Some follow the product into its new corporate home, accepting smaller titles and slower stock in exchange for the chance to finish the mission. They become the weird zealots inside a giant, practical enterprise, still talking about community while everyone else talks about quarterly retention. Others just burn out. They leave tech entirely, move back to cheaper cities, open coffee shops or yoga studios, or take quiet IC roles where nobody ever says the word movement. A few flip completely and become loud critics, writing Substacks and doing keynote talks about cult culture in startups. They tell the same stories, but now with punchlines instead of pride. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, you start to see that this is a story of belief management more than product management. Outside, the industry turns it into content. Business schools build tidy case studies about sunk cost bias and over-concentration risk. At conferences, a slide with the company logo pops up under the heading, "What Not to Do." People nod, take photos, and move on. The messy parts, the panic attacks, the marriages strained by 100-hour weeks, The quiet shame of realizing you hyped numbers you didn't believe don't fit neatly on a PowerPoint. So what really happened here, on a human level? For many insiders, the real loss wasn't the job or the unvested stock. It was the moment they realized how much of their identity was wrapped around a product that could be sold, resized, or rebranded in a single press release. The product lived on, just smaller. They were the ones who had to figure out who they were without it. And as we move into the final part of this story, that's the question that lingers. When the thing you worship doesn't love you back, what exactly are you left with? So now that we've seen the inside, let's rewind the tape and look at the label everyone kept throwing around. Cult. Was this company doomed the moment it turned one product into a religion? Or did it still have off-ramps it refused to take? On paper, the cult checklist was almost too neat. There was the charismatic leader, pacing the stage, selling destiny more than features. There was the sacred object, the flagship product that supposedly justified every layoff, every asset sale, every late-night sprint. There were rituals and slogans, those all-hands chants about protecting the core, and one product, one future. And there were social penalties for dissent. Question the burn rate? You didn't get it. Suggest investing in the profitable side businesses? You were not a culture fit. Data didn't guide the narrative. The narrative edited the data. However, here's the uncomfortable part. None of those ingredients are automatically bad. A strong story, a clear hero product, repeated rituals to align people, even a slightly unhinged founder speech now and then. That's half of Silicon Valley. Apple has a sacred object. Tesla has a charismatic leader. Plenty of rich, successful companies run on slogans and inside jokes. The difference is what those tools are pointed at. Are they aligning people around reality? Or are they being used to sandpaper reality until it fits the story? Because this is a story of what happens when the story wins every argument. Inside this business, every declining sales chart became early adopter noise. Every competitor passing them was validation of the category. Things will just get crazier and crazier once you realize that even profitable divisions were treated like heresy if they pulled focus away from the flagship. So what really happened here? Was it inevitable? Imagine a stronger board that actually said no, not just be 10x bolder. Imagine investors who didn't reward concentrated bets with bigger checks every time the numbers looked worse. Imagine a founder a little less fused to the product, whose entire childhood narrative and personal redemption arc weren't stapled to one SKU. Could this same company have been a healthy, slightly boring outfit with one big product instead of a bonfire built around a single idea? There were also bigger pressures pushing everything in the same direction. Venture capital loves a clean story. One product, infinite scale, just add money. The media loves a simple hero. The app that will change everything is easier to sell than a diversified portfolio of medium-good businesses. And tech culture keeps chanting focus like a spell, even when focus means ignoring obvious risks, like market saturation and a balance sheet held together with duct tape and hope. So here's the question for you. When does a strong product culture cross the line into a cult of the product? If you were inside one right now, would you even notice? Or would it just feel like passion, loyalty, and being one of the chosen friends who gets it? As we go deeper down this rabbit hole in the next section, we'll look at the people who finally tried to break that spell, and what it cost them. Here's the crazy part. This company's death spiral isn't some weird one-off. It's a symptom of an entire era where cheap money turned product obsession into a full-blown religion. For almost a decade, capital was basically on sale. Zero interest rates, giant funds, investors tripping over each other to shove money into anything that sounded like the next big thing. In that world, the safest way to look bold wasn't to build a boring, diversified business. It was to pick one shiny idea, crank the narrative to 11, and convince everyone you were the X company that would own an entire category. In theory, that sounds heroic. In practice, it meant founders got rewarded for concentration, not resilience. Why waste time spinning up a second or third product when your investors are literally saying, "Don't get distracted, pour everything into the flagship, swing for the fences"? When money is that cheap, nobody wants a steady double. Everyone wants the grand slam. So what really happened here is part of a much bigger story. Think about WeWork promising to elevate the world's consciousness while losing billions on office subleases. Think about Uber chasing global domination with rides and food long before real profits. Think about Theranos, the one drop of blood miracle box that, minor detail, didn't actually work. Different industries, same pattern. One product, one messiah, one giant narrative, and a business model held together with vibes. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, you start to see the incentives lining up in a very specific, very dangerous way. Founders get rich on paper by telling a single, clean story. Investors can underwrite. Investors get to mark up their stakes every round as that story gets louder. The media gets an easy headline: the iPhone of X, the Netflix of Y, the Tesla of Z. Nobody is rushing to write. Middling but durable three-product business slowly becomes profitable over 8 years. And that's the quiet tragedy. This system doesn't just create failures, it creates a special kind of failure. Companies that could have been solid, medium-risk, multi-product businesses if they'd been allowed to grow like normal, boring adults. Instead, they're pushed to become the scooter company, the co-working company, the one-room lit forever company that sells profitable divisions, lays off entire teams, and burns its own house down just to keep that one room glowing a little longer. The result isn't just bankruptcy, it's opportunity cost. All the other products that never got built. All the other customers who might have paid for less glamorous, but actually sustainable, ideas. So the next time you see a startup framed entirely around one magical product, ask yourself, who benefits from that story? Who needs you to believe this is destiny, not a bet? And what parts of the business are being quietly starved so the myth can stay alive? Because welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of cheap money. The unicorn might be dead, but the incentives that created it? Those are very much still breathing. So if a company can actually kill itself to save one product, how do you not end up starring in that same crazy story? This is a story of obsession turning into a business plan. Founders fall in love with an idea. It works for a while. Everyone gets a little rich on paper, and suddenly the product isn't just a product anymore. It's who we are. That's the moment you should get scared. For founders, the first rule is brutal. You are not your product, your childhood, your friends, your identity, your need to prove everyone wrong. None of that belongs on the balance sheet. If success secretly means this one thing must win, or my life is a failure, you will ignore every warning light. So what really happened here, underneath the drama, is a simple failure to define success as building a resilient company instead of a famous product. Real discipline looks like writing kill criteria before you fall in love. If churn hits X, if CAC doubles, if 3 launches in a row miss targets, it dies, even if it's your favorite baby. The time to decide that is when you're calm, not when your hands are shaking and the money is already on fire. Employees have their own early warning system. When asking, "Are we actually winning?" gets treated as disloyalty. That's a red flag. When every internal deck spins flat or declining numbers as stabilizing momentum, you're not in a business, you're in a fan club. If the company brand slowly becomes indistinguishable from one product name, you should quietly ask yourself, what happens to my job if this single bet stops working? Watch the language in all hands. Is every question answered with a story about destiny instead of data? Are profitable, boring lines talked about like an embarrassment, while the loss-making flagship is the future? As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier if nobody is allowed to say, "Hey, this isn't adding up." Investors and board members like to pretend they're just along for the ride. They're not. Inside a company, they can demand portfolio thinking, multiple product bets, diversified revenue, and a basic respect for unit economics. If you only reward big vision and never reward the team that keeps the dull, cash-generating products alive, don't be shocked when everything gets sold off to feed the shiny sinkhole. The hard part is challenging the charismatic founder before the crash. When someone ties their legacy to one product, it feels almost cruel to say, "We should shrink this." But that is literally the job. Cheap money made a lot of people forget. Optionality is the unsexy hero here. Keeping boring profitable lines, funding second and third products, building escape hatches so the company can pivot without needing a miracle. Discipline isn't the opposite of vision. It's the only way a great idea survives long enough to matter, without dragging everything else down with it. Because in the next part of this story, we'll see what happens when those guardrails aren't there at all. Because in the next part of this story, we'll see what happens when those guardrails aren't there at all. Remember the opening image? A company burning its entire house down just to keep one room lit. At the start, that sounded almost like a metaphor. Now, after everything we've walked through, you can trace the fire. Step by step. Decision by decision. It wasn't an explosion. It was a slow, careful arson. This is a story of humble origins that should have stayed humble. A scrappy founder, a small team of childhood friends, one surprisingly good idea that caught fire in the market. The flagship product worked. It made money. It made the company look smart. And that's where the problems started. Because once the product became the hero, everything else quietly got cast as an extra. At first, the obsession looked like focus. They staffed up around the flagship, poured marketing money into it, and told investors this was the future. When early hype hit, the valuation climbed. The press wrote breathless profiles, and the founder started doing that classic rich visionary thing, talking like the product wasn't just software or hardware, but a movement. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, you can see how every quarter, the language got grander, even as the numbers got shakier. Profitable divisions? Sold? Boring but steady enterprise contracts? Wound down. Teams that weren't directly touching the golden product? Laid off in waves. Each sacrifice was framed as discipline, as a bold bet on the core. Internally, though, people could see the math. Revenue from the flagship was stalling. Competitors were overtaking it. And yet leadership kept doubling down like the market was wrong, and the spreadsheet just needed more faith. So what really happened here? Sunk cost thinking put on a blazer and called itself vision. The company's identity fused so tightly with one product that killing it felt like killing the founder's entire sense of self. Capital rewarded the tunnel vision with fresh rounds. Media rewarded it with myth-making headlines. By the time anyone dared ask, "Hey, what are you building?" What if this idea just isn't that big? It was already socially impossible to say out loud. The human bill was huge. Thousands of careers disrupted. Years of work on those non-core lines erased with a single slide in an all-hands. People who had joined for stability found themselves refreshing job boards while the founder did one last interview about their uncompromising belief. In the end, they got what they wanted, a product they'll always be associated with. But when the company you built dies so that one product can theoretically live on under someone else's logo, is that really a win? Or is that the kind of victory that keeps you up at 3 a.m., replaying every choice? Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of a business that confused identity with strategy. The point isn't just to gawk at the wreckage, it's to recognize the pattern. Does your company talk like this? Do the ones you invest in? The ones you buy from? Because in the final part of this video, we're going to take this tragedy and turn it into a checklist. And some of the items on it are going to be uncomfortably familiar. So here's the uncomfortable part. It's easy to laugh at a company that burned its entire house down just to keep one room lit. It's a lot harder to ask whether you're quietly living in the same kind of house. Start with this. Inside your company, is there one product that people talk about as if it is the company? Not just the flagship, not just the hero, but the entire identity. The slide decks, the all hands, the recruiting pitches, the press quotes. Do they all orbit that one idea like it's the sun and everything else is just space dust? Listen to how people talk about other revenue. Are side businesses, services, or boring but profitable lines treated as distractions, non-core, or something leadership will clean up later? When someone suggests investing in a different product, does the room go quiet? Do the real decisions only happen when the conversation swings back to the thing? Now push it one step further. Is questioning that product socially or professionally risky? Not disagreeing with the CEO in public. That's always risky. But even in private, with friends at work, does it feel dangerous to say, "What if this doesn't work?" Do people lower their voices, make jokes instead of direct criticism, or say, "You didn't hear this from me, but..." Look around at the actual money flows. Are profitable or promising projects being cut just to feed one flagship? Did a steady, boring division get sold off so the company could double down on our vision? Have you watched teams that were hitting their numbers get gutted, while the pet product that's missing every target keeps hiring because it's strategic? When layoffs happen, how are they framed? Is every sacrifice justified as fuel for the same product, regardless of results? Quarter after quarter, is leadership saying, short-term pain, long-term gain, while that gain never actually shows up? At some point, you have to ask, is this strategy or is this a ritual sacrifice? If you're an investor or a founder, zoom out. Which companies right now look like they're walking this path? Are you rewarding balanced strategy, or are you throwing cheap capital at the loudest story about one world-changing product? Because as we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier whenever money chases narrative instead of numbers. In the comments, name a company you think is currently sacrificing everything for one product or vision. It could be a consumer app, a crypto project, an AI darling, whatever. Tell the story. Why do you think it ends badly? Or, if you think this time really is different, explain why. This isn't just gossip about failed companies. This is a story of incentives, egos, and structures that quietly push smart people toward crazy decisions. The whole point of this channel is to decode those patterns so we can spot the next spectacular rise and fall of a business before the flames hit the balance sheet. And in the next section, we're going to turn that into a concrete checklist you can actually use. So if this felt intense, good. It was supposed to. Because this company that burned its whole house down just to keep one room lit? That's not a one-off freak accident. It's one chapter in a much bigger series we're building on cults of the product, dead unicorns, and the moments when a beautiful story outruns the ugly numbers. We've already seen it with WeWork. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of a business that rented desks like a landlord, but talked like it was rewriting human community. We've seen it with Theranos, promising to save lives with a magic box that barely worked. Different industries, different founders, same basic spell. Ignore the spreadsheet, worship the narrative, and hope the money never stops. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Next up, we're lining up a deep dive that puts this case side by side with a streaming disaster and a hardware flop that tried to change entertainment forever, and mostly changed how fast you can burn $1 billion. Think WeWork's Messiah complex versus Theranos' secrecy, versus a gadget company that convinced itself people would rearrange their living rooms around one shiny brick. Same cult energy, very different collapse styles. So what really happened here is just one template. In the next chapters, we're going to map out the different cult structures. The vision cult, where the founder is the prophet. The product cult, where one idea becomes sacred. And the valuation cult, where the only real God is the last round's price tag. You'll see how each one breaks in its own special, crazy way. If you want to go deeper into these business thrillers, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. This channel is basically a bookshelf of corporate crime novels, except everything is real. The stakes are billions of dollars, thousands of jobs, and the egos of people who think they're building history instead of just another app or office brand. Here's where you come in. Drop a comment with the company you want to see next. Is there a future WeWork you're watching right now? A streaming platform lighting money on fire for one prestige show? A hardware brand sacrificing everything for a gadget that you and your friends quietly stopped using a year ago? If you suspect they're sacrificing the whole business to save one dying product, name them. Because this is a story of patterns. And the goal isn't just to entertain you with gossip about rich people problems. Every future video is going to keep mixing dramatic storytelling, financial autopsy, and psychological insight, so you can read between the lines the next time a CEO tells you their childhood dream is about to change the world. In the next section, we'll start turning that into a practical checklist you can use on any too good to fail product you see. So let's end where we began, with the fire. All the way through this story, the company kept throwing furniture into the flames to keep one product glowing. Profitable lines went in. Talented teams went in. Eventually, the walls themselves went in. This is a story of what happens when a business stops asking, "Does this make sense?" and starts asking, "How do we keep the myth alive just a little bit longer?" Because once a product becomes sacred, the math stops mattering. Executives who knew the numbers were bad still framed every quarter as a temporary setback on the road to inevitable success. Internal decks talked about destiny, while cash burn quietly accelerated. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. You end up selling the healthy divisions to fund the sick one, and calling it a bold strategic focus. Founders, employees, investors. It doesn't really matter which chair you're sitting in. The temptation is the same. When you've poured years of your life, other people's money, and half your identity into one shiny idea, it feels easier to burn the rest of the house than to admit the fire might be dying. You tell yourself it's just one more round, one more pivot, one more sacrifice. But what exactly are you sacrificing? So pay attention to what's actually going into the fire. Is it a bloated marketing budget, or the only division that reliably makes money? Is it a redundant feature team, or the people who keep the lights on? Is it just bad ideas, or your ethics, your reputation, your ability to look your friends in the eye and say, "We were honest about the risks"? When a company starts talking about short-term pain for long-term vision, ask whose pain and whose vision. Here's the uncomfortable personal takeaway. It's okay to fall in love with a product. Every great company starts with someone who cared way too much about a problem most people ignored. The danger starts when you love it so much you literally cannot imagine a world where it doesn't win. At that point, you're not running a business anymore. You're running a religion with a burn rate. Inside every future flameout, there will be at least one meeting where someone could have asked, "What if we're wrong about this product?" and didn't. Be the person who asks that. Be the annoying voice in the corner who says, "Show me the unit economics again," while everyone else is clapping for the keynote. That one awkward question can save years of your life and millions of dollars of someone else's money. Because in the end, you do not get bonus points for loyalty to a bad bet. Markets don't care how pure your childhood dream was. Investors don't care how many all-nighters you pulled. When the fire gets out of control, it doesn't matter who struck the first spark. So learn from the company that killed itself to save one product. Fall in love with ideas, but stay married to reality. And whatever role you play, founder, employee, investor, don't be the last one holding the match in a house that's already burning for someone else's dream.